Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. My name is Ryan, and we're part of the Indiana Driving Record Card Project, which is a student organization that's advocating for a bill in Indiana that would allow undocumented residents to have a card which is very similar to a license that would allow them to drive legally. And my colleagues are.
Hi, I'm Molly Ferazani.
I'm Annemarie.
So today we are just going to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are, what we do, and just how to successfully organize a student group for political advocacy. So today we're going to talk a little bit about just our history, how we got started and how we began our group, and then also how we as a group of 3 co-leads lead our group and motivate our team members, and then also how we work with them and teach them how to collaborate as a team to advocate for a political position. And then we'll talk about how we do our outreach to the people we're trying to convince, and also to donors and stakeholders. And finally, we will have an interactive activity to help you decide how you want to become an advocate and how you could do your own advocacy for a topic that you care about. So to start with a little bit of background, we formed about, yes. So a driving record card is very similar to a license. It looks pretty similar, and about 16 states right now, including DC, have already passed one. You can see on the right a picture of what it looks like in Illinois, and all it allows a person to do is drive within that state legally. Right now, undocumented immigrants in Indiana are not allowed to drive legally, but to get to work, to take their kids to school, to do everything a normal person needs to do, they still have to drive. So they're forced to disobey the law. And this bill would eliminate that problem for them. And so you sign up, instead of your social security number, you use your individual taxpayer number. And there's certain other requirements like residency requirements and other things like that, but it's very similar to a license. And what we've been doing as a group for about 2 years now is we have done all the research on the effects this bill would have in the state. So economic effects, educational effects for children, what would happen with the car insurance industry, to try, and then we share this information with legislators, with donors, with everyone that would care about it, and work with the South Bend community and the broader Indiana community to try to get this bill passed. So how did we get started with this? Just 2 years ago, the original co-leads were working on an internship with a law firm in South Bend that works with the undocumented population. And they were also taking some classes on social justice. And they just heard over and over again that the main ask of the undocumented community is for the ability to be able to drive legally. And so they decided to start doing something about this. And they started to meet people in South Bend that were actually working on this already. And that is how INDRC formed. And you can see the picture right next to the driving card is Jesus Rivera, who is an incredible community activist that has been working on this for over 7 years now. And so we got in contact with her, and now we work as a partnership together to try to advocate for this bill. So in order to work on our goals and progress with this legislation, we are constantly emailing people, donors, legislators, business owners, community members, anyone that would care about this bill, to convince them to support us and to convince them to be advocates. Some pretty big successes we've had are bipartisan support in the Senate and the House. This bill has been introduced by Republican and Democratic members in both the House and the Senate in Congress in Indiana, which is a huge milestone that just doesn't really happen in a very conservative state. We've also passed a resolution in South Bend supporting this legislation. You can see the picture there. We had a huge turnout from the undocumented community, from the community of people that support, and from students like ourselves. So much so that people had to wait outside the room because they couldn't fit. And right now, what we are doing is we're meeting with legislators, we're emailing more people, and we're also trying to build a coalition of university students all across the state to support and advocate for this bill. So to start with a little bit of how we work as a group. This is all what we have done as a group, but it's definitely generalizable to any type of advocacy campaign anywhere, and things that you would need to know if you want to be an advocate.
Come up with
Okay, so we are 3 co-leads, and how we work together is we have weekly meetings. And we always like decide what tasks we're gonna do, and we decide to split it up with specific roles. So we always have me reading the other team members' research. I give them comments and feedback. Molly will send emails with the assignments each week for the team members, and Annemarie will make the slide deck for our meetings. And then there's always a bunch of other little tasks, and so we've learned how to divide them up, but not divide them up so that we're all just doing a bunch of work and then we squish it together at the end. Instead, we're communicating about what goals we want to have from each meeting, what we want to get out of everything we're doing. And then we trust that each other will actually do the work well and be able to implement this work correctly. And so that is a huge, huge lesson for if you're going to try to have leadership and try to lead a team, you really need to trust who you're working with. Because if you can't trust them, then you need to really communicate to figure that out or work to find a different team member that will help and make sure that they actually do the work that you need them to do. In terms of our group, we've learned to lead but not control the group. So we ask for their input in the decisions that we're going to make. For example, if we want to do university outreach, we ask them for their input on what do they think is the best way to do outreach, and if they have any suggestions or comments for us. Even with this conference, we showed them the script of what we wanted to talk about, and they gave us suggestions. And then logistically wise, you have to be organized. We have a Google Drive with folders for everything that we think we need and all the different topics that we work on. And then in our weekly meetings, we will also work together to try to make sure that we're as organized as possible. And then the main thing we do is we learn from failure. So we're always talking about how can we be more effective, how can we work better together, and how can we really lead this team as well as we would like them to. So the main thing, how do we come up with ideas? We pretty much didn't know how to do anything when we started, and all of this is just learning as we go. So the main thing is we just don't think of something and we don't just do the first thing we think of. We have these huge brainstorming sessions like you can see in that picture, where we'll just write down a bunch of different ideas of things we could do, like how do we do better outreach? We'll throw out emails, calls, a newsletter, all kinds of ideas, and then we'll talk and discuss with the team to narrow it down to the best ideas. And we always ask our team members what they think, and we also ask them in different ways. We don't just say, what do you feel about this? We'll say, once we talk about an idea, what aspect of this idea do you think is good? Is there any aspect that you think is bad? And it's all about creating an environment where they feel comfortable to criticize us and to give us better ideas. And if we don't know what to do, which is a lot, we'll ask people. Most of you are probably students. We're students as well. There's an expert in pretty much everything at your university. So all we have to do is look up each department and find a professor that we think would help us, and we email them. And we ask for a meeting and they give us some ideas, which has been pretty amazing so far. So as a team, we have meetings once a week with the people that we work with, and there are other students, pretty much mostly freshmen and sophomores, that are just amazing. And we have these once a week meetings that function similar to a class where we talk to them, we give them ideas, and we talk about what they're supposed to do. So the main thing we have is assignments every single week, and they're always detailed. We try to be as clear as possible about what we expect them to do. And we also try to make it balanced to where they're doing substantial work, but they're also not doing too much, so that we know that their work will be good. And this is something to think about and organize yourselves as you're doing your own campaign. How much can you reasonably expect yourself to do, and how much can you reasonably expect other people to do and do well? And then we're always trying to be engaging with brainstorming sessions and with just other types of interactive activities to make sure that they're engaged in these meetings. And so then the main thing that we do is research. We found out that we are trying to present to conservative legislators who really care about the economic impacts of this bill. And so we needed a lot of research on what the economic impacts would be. And so with a bunch of freshmen and sophomore students that have no idea how to do a professional research project, we knew that everyone would need guidance. So we have weekly check-ins with the groups about what type of research they should be doing, how far they've come, and what else still needs to be done. The main thing we've learned is that most of us have no idea what we're doing, but some people think of that as a hindrance and say, I don't know, we don't know how to do this, so we can't do this. And other people say, I don't know how to do this, so I'm going to learn how to do it. And that type of mindset is what really changes the group. So if there's even one negative person in a research group, we found that it brings the whole research group down, and they don't end up coming up with a good deliverable at the end, because that one negative person said, we can't do this, or this is impossible. So that ended up slowing down everyone else, even if everyone else was very optimistic. So that is something very important to look for when you're trying to choose a team member, not just skills, but optimism and the idea that they can actually do something. Next is the big question: how do we do research if we have no idea how to research? This was obviously a problem for us, because the main thing that we do as a team is research, but we had no experience at all. We really didn't know what we were doing. And so we basically just had to figure it out as we go. And so what we did is we asked people, we asked professors, we asked everyone to learn what we could do. And so a few just lessons that we have learned is qualitative and quantitative research are both equally as rigorous and require a lot of work. You may think you know how to do qualitative research, but the way to interview someone and the way to ask questions is much more difficult and complicated than you think. So we were always asking professors, always asking people for help with everything we did. And then also relying on your network is really, really important when you're doing research. And so we would talk to other students that have done research before. We would talk to all kinds of people. And the main idea we had was, if we don't know how to do something, we're not going to do it. We're not just not going to do it, we're going to figure out how. So we would just basically figure it out. We would do online tutorials. If we couldn't ask a professor, we would just have trial and error. If something failed, we would try a new way. And so that was the best thing that we learned, is never to just not do something because we don't know how to do it. And we would have to change a lot as we went. And then this is something, once we started to become better and better at this, knew what to do, is do we just teach everything we've learned to the team members, or do we kind of let them figure it out as we had to figure it out when we learned? And so the main thing we learned was, if you give them too much guidance, then your team members start to rely more and more on you for more questions, and they don't have the experience of learning how to do these things ourselves. And so we tried to lean back a little bit and let them figure it out themselves, because learning how to just figure out how to do research, how to do some type of qualitative analysis that we had never done before, gave us a lot of confidence in learning that we could do anything that we didn't really know how to do. But then we gave them a little too little guidance in the beginning, and then that led to some incomplete projects. So we learned how to balance giving them clear and direct assignments, but also saying, if you don't know how to do this, you can come to us and we'll help you. And so we created an environment where we give them a clear idea of what they need to do, and we let them try to figure it out. And if they don't know, they can always come to us. But we try to have that balance, and that's something you would definitely learn as a leader too, is you can't give exact instructions on how to do everything, but you also have to give some type of guidance. And then finally, whatever you're doing, you want it to be relevant to the person, because that gives them accountability and that gives them a stake in this game. And so for our members, a lot of them learn really important research skills that they'll be able to use in any job and are talked about all the time in job searches. And then they also learn how to present to an audience. So they learn how to present very tactfully to legislators that typically do not hold the same views and would typically not support a bill like this, which is really important even in interviewing for a job. There's a specific way you ask your boss how to do something, or a specific way you ask a specific coworker if you want them to do something for you. And learning how to be tactful and very aware of what people think of the way you're asking questions was a really good skill that our people learned how to do. So now we'll move on to what we actually did, which is outreach. And Annemarie will take it from here.
Yeah, so of course, a big part of advocacy is knowing who you have to reach out to. You know, obviously, we're not just going to accomplish this working on our own as Notre Dame students. So we had to ask ourselves two sets of questions. First of all, who are the people who are actually going to be implementing this change and how can we reach out to them, as well as who is this change going to affect and how can we reach out to those people. So in terms of people we need to support us, we need support from lawmakers in Indiana, people in the House and the Senate and the governor who are going to be putting this bill into effect, people at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles who will be important in actually getting people their cards. And then on the community side, the undocumented community, as well as people who come into contact with them, like their bosses or their employees, their teachers, all these people that we need to make sure we're hearing from. So the first thing we had to look at is messaging to a conservative state. Obviously, the issue of being documented or undocumented is a really politicized issue, a very partisan issue in the United States. And Indiana is a very conservative state in which undocumented immigrants don't have the same rights that they do in California, for example. So we had to figure out how to phrase this in a way that we could get what we wanted and get this access to driving for undocumented people in Indiana without really stirring up the resentment or fear that people feel in Indiana. So one of the big ways that we did this was narrowing down our focus issues and deciding what we're going to present to these lawmakers or donors that we need for this conservative support. So instead of focusing on maybe the idea of rights or the idea of what undocumented immigrants deserve or the hardships that they go through, we really focused, first of all, not on the undocumented population. We stressed the benefits that this bill would have for all Hoosiers. And so in doing so, we relied a lot on our research about how this would benefit the state economy, how it would improve traffic safety, and how it would make law enforcement more efficient. And we did this so that we could really present this as a benefit to the whole state, really leaving out the idea of who exactly would be driving. Obviously, that's the elephant in the room, but we hoped that we could present it in such a way that the benefits would outweigh the odds. But we also tried to avoid these hot and button words. We very rarely use the word undocumented when talking about our bill. We try to phrase it in ways that we just talk about maybe the people who are going to be driving or how this would affect all Hoosiers again. Sometimes we would talk about mixed status families where you'd have like maybe an undocumented parent or parents and then the children are citizens. So again, trying to focus this less on the undocumented population. Also avoiding talking about privileges and rights, especially in today's political climate. Another thing that we really tried to do is avoid a public campaign. Because there can be such a backlash against undocumented immigrants, we wanted to keep this as low-key as possible. So we really worked within the state government, really relying on someone to give us a connection to another person, rather than going to the media, going to social media or a newspaper or television to try to get our message across. Because we didn't want to stir up anger from people who are vehemently opposed to this sort of thing without hearing our pitch. We wanted to go into a meeting and have people have our pitch be the first thing they hear about it, hear first about the economic benefits and law enforcement before they could decide on a hard no. We also didn't want this to become an issue where people might feel that, or lawmakers would feel that they would lose constituents for this. We actually did research last year that, no Republican ever in the country, in any of these other 16 states, has lost re-election based on voting for this bill. But in any case, we wanted to avoid even that possibility. So then in terms of actually pitching our research, what do we do when we go into these meetings? We started off, being maybe a bit too wordy and maybe not having the right approach, but we really refined the pitch that we have. We have a slide deck. It's about 10 to 15 minutes, depending who's presenting, with time for questions. We have a lot of detailed economic analysis. We try to just give the main points, and then we send a follow-up email with the details in our white paper. So that way we can present the main ideas and really get across the economic benefits and the law enforcement benefits without losing our audience's attention. We really try to tailor our message based on the audience. So before every pitch, we create a Google Doc and we do research about who we're pitching this to. For example, if it's a lawmaker, we look at what committees they're on. If they're on a health committee, we might want to emphasize how this would help people get to their driver's appointments. If they're on the transportation committee, we can really ham up the traffic safety benefits. And we also look at where they're from. What are some industries in their area that would be impacted by this? For example, we recently had a meeting with the staff of a lawmaker who had like a packing hub in their districts. There were a lot of shipping trucks coming in and out. And so we really stressed the traffic safety impact and how that can help truck drivers boost the local economy. And we have a lot of workshops in our weekly meetings about this, helping people do this research. We would do we'd assign a person and say, okay, you have 7 minutes to figure out what is important to this person that you're pitching to, and how can you incorporate this? And then they give a pitch to us 7 minutes later. We also do a lot of practice on these pitches before our group members go and present them so that we can make sure they're staying within the time limit, that they're making good eye contact, even though it's over Zoom, that they're engaging, that they know how to answer questions, like common questions that were asked. So we really make sure that people are prepared before we send them off to do these meetings. We also really like to make our presentation visually engaging. And we try to have some kind of charts, like emphasize big numbers. We don't want to put a lot of text on the screen because, of course, you risk losing people's attention if they're just trying to read what's on the screen and don't understand what you're saying. And finally, we rely a lot on our distribution materials. So we have a white paper, which is basically a summary of all our research, as well as infographics and information packets that are more of a smaller summary, and as well as that they can send to other people who are interested in this research. So you're probably wondering this question. This is about undocumented immigrants. This is working with and working for the undocumented community in Indiana. So it seems unfair to leave them out of this discussion, to take away any human element, to make this a really statistical economic presentation. And while we try to be pragmatic in understanding the beliefs of who we're talking with and what they're going to be voting on, we want to add this human element and still make it palatable to people who are automatically anti-immigration. So a big way that we did this was researching the educational impact. Education is a really big issue anywhere, and for conservatives in Indiana, this often manifests itself as school choice. So they want people to be able to choose where they go to school and have the government support that, even when it's a private school or a charter school. So our research from a community survey found that 69% of undocumented immigrants say that they can't get their kids to school, and 74% say that their kids can't get to extracurricular activities. So we kind of try to incorporate this in there, both to frame it as, okay, people can't get to the schools that they want to go to, an issue of school choice, but also, again, going back to this idea of mixed status families, that a lot of these children are US citizens. They've lived in Indiana their whole lives, and maybe because their parents are undocumented, they can't be driven anywhere. We have, we bring up these quotes from respondents. One in particular said that if her son misses the bus to school, he misses the whole day of school because she can't get there. And another one said that she wants her son to be able to partake in sports, but he can't because he can't get transportation to and from practice. So these are really things that anyone can resonate with, especially a lot of legislators are parents. They'll understand what it might feel like to not be able to get your kid to school. So in this way, we can add this human element while not, overemphasizing the documentation status of the people that we're working with. Okay, so then also we work a lot with the community, and this is something that we really make an active effort to do. We don't want it to be like a white savior thing where we're trying to jump in and work for the undocumented community. Again, this is an issue that affects everyone in the state, not just the undocumented population, so it's going to affect us, as well as we want to really be working with the undocumented community. What do people need from us? What can we get from them? It's a mutual conversation. So along those lines, as Emma was saying earlier, we worked a lot with Jesus Rivera, who is a community organizer in the South Bend area. She's also a member of the St. Adalbert's Church Social Justice Council, and they're really active in community issues in South Bend, including driving. For example, Jesus recently had a training for some people at the church about how they can get involved with local government. Not necessarily just on this issue, but on issues in general. And some of our group members went over there one afternoon and gave people a presentation on how to find their state and local lawmakers, what a mayor is, what the House is versus the Senate. And so these sort of strategies to get people involved. We've also been, when we're working on endorsements, we reach out to people in the community to ask for them to reach out for endorsements from local businesses, for example. There are a lot of advocates in both Plymouth and South Bend. So as Emma was saying, we got this resolution in South Bend, and that was so important to have the community members there, literally in droves. There were hundreds of them, and a lot of people came up and gave their testimonies, and that was really powerful, really helped convince kind of these holdouts in the city council. And finally, we had a summit at the end of last semester in Indianapolis, a statewide summit with people from the undocumented community, as well as allies and advocates from around the state came. We gave our presentation. We had testimonies from community members and from our group leaders, as well as from one of the bill's sponsors. So as I was saying, also, we're really trying to emphasize this healthy connection. And sometimes we feel that we're maybe not working enough with the community. And that was difficult during COVID as well. So we've made more of an effort this year to keep in touch with the community and avoiding this us and them rhetoric, that we're all working together. Jesus has been working on this for 7 years and we've only been here for 2. So what can we do to support their efforts? So some lessons that we've learned from this process, as I'm sure you've been able to tell, it's a lot of learning as we go and just figuring it out, whether that's research or different types of outreach or how to lead the team effectively. We've really been able to learn from mistakes and implement improvements that we have. And we really try to solicit feedback from anyone, people on our team, people in the community about what we can continue to do to make this project better and hopefully pass the bill next year. Does anyone have any questions before we go on to our activity?
We do have one question in the Q&A. Great. Awesome. So the question is that this participant is wondering how you guys might work to highlight more stories and what resources you might need to make that possible. As I think that as a former staffer for the US Senate, these personal stories are very compelling and they're very proud of Emma.
So we had this community survey, I think just over a year ago, like within the last 2 years, where these quotes about education are coming from. But there are also a lot of other quotes in it about work and people getting to work and ways in which, as well as their relationship with law enforcement and feeling safe versus feeling unsafe in their community. So we certainly use those more when we're reaching out to people with whom we already have support. For example, we were reaching out to the Black Caucus earlier this semester. And so they're mostly Democrats, and that there are also Haitian undocumented immigrants in Indiana. So this is definitely a bill that they support. So we emphasized more the educational impact, especially because that was sort of newer research compared to the economic side.
Yeah, and in addition, we have a few videos of actual testimonies, and we have been doing a lot of these training sessions in local communities. And this is mostly Jesus doing it rather than, and we're just kind of helping her. Where she's training people how to talk to a legislator and how to be present in some of these meetings. So more and more as we go forward with meetings with legislators, Jesus, who's always there, will bring a member or two of the community that this will either directly affect or indirectly affect, so that these personal stories can start coming and we have more of an equal balance of of voices. So that is definitely something we are working on, and we are trying to include more and more into our presentations.
We also hosted a community summit last December, in which a bunch of people that this is directly affecting came out and actually told their stories in person to a lot of our supporting legislators, and people that were helping us with the bill. And that was extremely moving, and hearing it in person definitely drove the point further. So holding more of those in the past has been very beneficial to get the personal stories out there. So,
Any other questions before we go on?
That's it.
okay, so we now have an interactive activity.
Here we go.
So if you scan the worksheet, or if you just tap that link that we have right there, we'll be able to, you can open up this worksheet that we made with some questions. Because you have something that you care about, you have something that you want to change, and we're going to show you how to do it by filling this out. So our first question is, what is an issue of justice that you care about? And so we want you to take a few minutes and think about this. Write it down, and if you could, since you are muted, just put it in the chat, and we'll have Frankie read it out for us, and then we'll be able to just have some discussion about it. Some things to consider while thinking about this question. Okay, so an issue of justice that you care about. How is this issue affecting people locally? Would you like to do something about it right now? What are you already doing if you are already doing something about it? And is this a broad issue? And if it is a broad issue, how can we kind of narrow it down to something more locally that you can affect directly right now? And so examples from INDRC and what we've done in this question is our broad issue was immigration reform. We wanted to help in any way that we can, but we realized that on a smaller scale, we would be able to localize the impact by asking the community members and the undocumented population, specifically Indiana, what would benefit their lives the greatest. And the biggest answer was driving. And so that is how our original co-leads decided to begin this project. And so if you just take a few moments to kind of answer that, is the answer in the chat?
Is there an answer in the chat? Not yet. I'm going to see if I can unmute our participants.
We also want to stress that, like, the issue of justice or something that you care about, it doesn't have to be this huge, monumental, changing issue. It can be something that's just personally important to you, and it will pertain to the rest of the questions.
And to our participant, you should be able to talk if you want to. Otherwise, you can put your answer in the Q&A for the chat.
So can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I was just actually thinking about, my name is Erin Corcoran. I am a professor at Notre Dame. And I was kind of reflecting upon, I don't know if any of you guys were able to hear the keynote from Dr. Hooker this afternoon about justice, and kind of thinking about, you know, what does justice mean, and how we all have different understandings of justice. And so I was just curious, in working with your undocumented populations, do you find that they have different understandings of what justice is? And I think for me, I've had to kind of rethink what I'm thinking about when I think about justice, because I'm trained as a lawyer, so I'm always thinking about accountability, but I'm realizing that may not be the best lens to think about the work of justice. Sort of in the theme of the conference, reimagining justice. And so, you know, I'm just wondering for undocumented populations, you know, what does it mean for justice to be fulfilled for them? Does it mean to have status? Does it mean to be recognized? I'm just curious about that. And then for me, the work that I'm trying to work on with respect to justice issues are around refugees. In particular, I've been doing a lot of work lately on trying to help Afghan families get their families out of Afghanistan. So that's been a lot of the work that I've been doing recently. And realizing how complicated and hard it is, even for US citizens, to get their family out of Afghanistan. And that's been a real challenge. And so for me, I would see a model of justice where that would not be so challenging. So those are my thoughts.
Well, first of all, the work that you're the work that you're currently working on is wonderful. And I think that the main idea of justice that we've seen from this project and that we see generally from the undocumented population is just being treated with respect and treated equally, and just getting whatever rights they deserve as best as possible. And so on the smaller scale, it is just driving, like being able to get to work, being able to get to school, and just being able to have equal opportunity as everyone else. I think that's the justice. And so it's interesting, your perspective of justice, because my parents are both lawyers and I was raised on like, yes, justice is truth and accountability. But I think in this context, it really is just like being treated equally and having the same opportunities as everyone else. So it's good too.
Yeah, accountability and like that type of justice has never come up once in any of our discussions with the undocumented community. It's really just been, we want to be able to live a normal life. And that's pretty much that's what their idea of justice would be, is not having to.
Emma, I'm just going to interject here. What was really interesting for me when we were in class earlier this week was one of our classmates shared that there's actually no word in Spanish for accountability. And so I went back and like asked people about, there is no Spanish word for accountability.
Wow.
Or French or Portuguese word, you know. And so it's interesting because that kind of aligns with what you're saying. Like for them, justice is not necessarily about accountability. And in fact, accountability isn't even a word in their language.
Yeah, and that was just so interesting because, yeah, it really has never come up. It's always just been about like the local, like what's happening now. And yeah, I don't think any of them really care that much about about who's making these plans and who's implementing all these programs into place. That's just never come up. I'm sure definitely some of them do, and that's a big issue for them, but for most it's just, I want to live normally and not be terrified every day.
Right.
No, one more thing to add is I don't even sense any hostility from anyone like towards the legislators that haven't like passed these laws yet. They really just want like the equality, which is just interesting. So the next question that we have to kind of forward the workshop building is, what are some achievable objectives that you can define and work towards in pursuit of your goal? And so if we move on again, while we're thinking about this, if we just consider how can you create a concrete goal? How do I remain aspirational while focusing on smaller objectives? So for this is like, how do you keep the larger objective in mind while putting in smaller achievable tasks to get to that goal? And following that, what are some of these smaller goals that will ultimately build up to the overall objective? And so the way that we thought about this with our project is the goal is to pass the bill. And the smaller goals that we've kind of worked towards in order to reach that, which we did not yet reach that, is conservative support, endorsements, community support, and basically just working individually with everyone around us in order to try to make the bill as pertains to the legislation and deliver our presentations to persuade it to get passed. So.
Well, as someone who worked in the policy space, you guys have got a good plan of action. For me, when I work on refugee issues, I think about, so my concrete goal, right, is to get family members out of Afghanistan, which is right now pretty aspirational. So I'm focusing on smaller objectives, like how do I get the State Department to be involved in helping evacuations or caring about the family members that I care about. or thinking about how the policies that they have about who they're going to evacuate are not comprehensive enough. And trying to build support with different people in like you guys were saying, like in like Republican coalitions that on issues that they can identify with. I mean, you guys have a really good plan here. It's really great. I don't know if there's other people on the call, so just tell me to be quiet if I need to be quiet. I'm just,
Thank you. No, I don't know if they're,
I don't think there's anyone else participating right now.
yeah, so you're good. And we really would appreciate any feedback because
no, and I actually think like I would love for you guys to like, one of the things that's really interesting right now is that the Keough School, which is where the Kroc Institute is housed, is one of their big things is like trying to do policy work. And what I think has been really challenging is like, how do you get people in higher education, like faculty members, to understand what they need to do to be effective policy agents of policy change? And your guys' PowerPoint is actually a really great roadmap for that. And so I would love to think about ways to get you in front of communications people at Keough and faculty at Keough about like how you do this work, because you guys have like laid out a great roadmap for this. So I'm super impressed.
Yeah, that's amazing. And thank you for coming, Professor,
Yeah.
too. But yeah, we're at the end of this month, we're having basically this, but with students, like a training. So we'd also like love your feedback on kind of some of the questions we're asking, and we're hoping to kind of learn from that training of how to best do this type of thing to just like, if you have some idea or something you're interested in changing, like you actually can do something about it.
Yeah.
Which is super cool. And so any connections, anything we can do with like this experience, we would love to help. So
Yeah, I mean, I would love to follow up with you guys like later, like, Emma, I can coordinate with you, but like, I would love to sit down with you guys and just sort of brainstorm, think about ways to help you guys out. I think what you're doing is phenomenal. Like it's pretty sophisticated too. Like the ways in which you guys have tiered stuff, it's pretty sophisticated. So I think you could actually teach faculty a lot in this space.
Well, thank you. We would love to do something. And there's a lot we didn't include and a lot that can be changed. So.
Yeah.
Well, and I think what's also really great about what you've chosen as a project is something that's like, it's pretty discreet and it is actionable, and it's got a lot of compelling reasons why you should do it that I think actually resonate with both sides of the aisle, right? It's not partisan. So.
We appreciate that feedback. We can keep going through the questions and then.
Okay, yeah. Sorry, yeah. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying because we are planning to present it to students as a workshop, and so like all of the feedback that you're getting is extremely helpful for that, and that is the end goal, is to kind of teach more people that they can do this. And yeah, so if you think anything should be.
Okay, yeah, sure.
But is that, yeah. So our third question is, what do you not know how to do? That's a barrier to addressing this issue. And then the things that we have to consider during that kind of questioning is like, what skills or knowledge do I think I'm missing? I can't do this because I don't know how to do this. What achievable objective is the hardest and why? And so some of our barriers that we hit with this was reaching out to legislators. I know I didn't know how to do that. And that was kind of for the second premise, like, I can't do this because I don't know how to do X. Like, if I had started this on my own and didn't kind of join it as a project, I would not have known that it was as easy as it is to reach out to legislators. They often respond to the emails. I had no idea. Another one is that professional research, especially quantitative. I feel like that's something that is such a valuable skill, and we've really learned it from being part of this project. And then building a political capital. So just networking and going into meetings, having Senator Niskotsky like behind us has been super helpful. Getting other people to realize that it's like a reputable thing and that people are backing it, and that they should also support it. So if you have anything to say about those or.
One other bullet I would add on the consider would be like, what I do doesn't matter, or like, I can't impact change, or like just feeling like that sort of sense of apathy or intractability that's, I think some people feel. And I think the response is like, that actually legislators and policymakers want to hear from people, individuals, right? Not just groups, about like why they care about particular issues. But I think sometimes people feel like, what do I have to offer? I have no expertise. What do people care what I think? And like, as a voter, you actually, that is your power, right? So all you have to say is that you're a voter. And so you can weigh in that way too.
I think also something that we can probably emphasize a bit more with students is like the power of the Notre Dame brand, especially in Indiana. That's super useful for us. Like,
Yeah.
we have a girl in our group right now who's from Southern Indiana, and she's like, yeah, like everyone loves Notre Dame. It's really important to be able to have this name. So I think even like starting off with that, like even if you don't know what to do, you have this brand attached to your name, attached to your email.
And we've also found that it's refreshing to talk to students instead of like these lobbying agencies that they're talking to every day. I mean, like.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Emma.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like, it's open doors that you would think would be closed, but it's actually like, because we're students, people will talk to us, and because we're so organized, and we'll give them like these infographics. They're just expecting a bunch of students to come and like say, this is important because it's important. But then we come with like these infographics, this research, and they're like, it really like, their expectations are low, and then they're like, it's easy to like blow them away in a way. So just like having students realize that they do have that kind of unique power, and like that unique position that will actually open some doors and get them meetings that, they might not have been able to have.
Well, and I think that's right, because what you want to be able to do is give policymakers two things. One that your colleague said was just like the connections to places of power, and that you also are able to give them information that can help them persuade their colleagues in the legislature, right? And so if you come in with those pieces of information and help them educate their colleagues, and also show like why this is something that like big institutions care about, like, you're going to be able to kind of convince them in ways that you would not been otherwise able to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. Thank you.
Our next question is, what skills or knowledge do you have, and what can you figure out by yourself? So kind of the opposite of what we just talked about. And so our consider for this one is just, do I know how to conduct effective research? Can I speak another language? Have I taken a marketing class? Do I know how to quantitative research? And anything else that you might put on a resume kind of. And so some of our answers and some of the things that we had seen in applications to our, because it is under the Student Policy Network, we had people apply to join the group. And a lot of the skills that we noticed were basic research skills. People were good at presentations and public speaking, and political internship experience, which was all really valuable. And I think that's also something that a lot of people that would be interested in something like this kind of would have just from their academic trajectory this far. And so we thought that was interesting, and that's something that can kind of encourage people listening to this presentation to get involved and to start their advocacy work, because it really is just the basic skills, and we've grown them since then.
The only other bullet I would add on the consider bullet would be, do you know someone who's undocumented? Because I mean, even if you don't have these skills, like if you know someone who's undocumented and you can speak about that person, that can be a compelling story for policymakers.
Hearing the personal stories at the summit was one of the most valuable. Like,
Yeah.
it was incredible.
And even for like the city council, like that was gonna pass anyway, but having all those people there like energized the people that were gonna advocate for the bill. So it didn't like change the outcome, but it did change like that group.
The momentum, right? And like
Yeah.
the fervor for it, yeah.
It reminds you why you're doing it too, I think. It like humanizes it.
Well, the human element is really important for policymakers sometimes, particularly in places where their constituents may not be behind the issue.
our. Okay, so our fifth question is who will help you? And so for this, we kind of considered like, whose support do I need? And this was really focused on professors, mentors, organizations, or even friends with knowledge or connections that could help. Who is already doing this or doing something similar? And this would help because instead of like starting your own project, there's like safety in numbers. And so if you have a similar goal and you're both going to try to do the same thing, maybe joining together and starting it together. And how can I get in contact with these people, organizations, and then what are effective ways to reach out? So some of the things that we've done are that Jesusa, which we spoke about before, is our community contact. And she's been working on this legislation for 7+ years. And so she helps us with so many things. She helps with the political aspect of things, but she also helps us with getting connected with the community members. She gives a lot of valuable ideas on how to organize things and stuff like that. She's been super helpful. And then we also reached out to Professor Zizajula for quantitative research last year, and she helped edit the white paper. And so just having those connections and having people that are more knowledgeable than you to kind of assist as you're getting started is very valuable.
Yeah, and I think the quantitative stuff is really important for
Yeah.
policymakers, like graphs and things that they can, I mean, qualitative is also really important, but I think the fact that you guys have figured out that it's important to have both is really great from an advocacy perspective.
And I think the quantitative is also something that a lot of people don't have going into it.
Right, yeah, I
it's-
agree with that.
And so our next one is, who is your target audience? And so what we consider with this is, who am I trying to convince with my research? Who benefits from this advocacy? And then who am I trying to inform, educate, etc. And so for our answers, we're really trying to convince the conservative legislators who control the state government, as those on the left side are usually more inclined to just support the bill anyway.
Right.
And then for the community members and undocumented residents who will be affected by the legislation, we definitely want them to know that we're doing this, and we want to have their feedback and their input on what they think would be helpful. And so on the informing and educating, I feel like this is kind of the motor for that. We're trying to inform and educate students and other people that would be interested in this type of advocacy work, because those are the people that are going to make the most impact with helping. It's that energy, and it's the group energy of people that care about it, really. So
I would add small business. I would add Chamber of Commerce. Because there's a lot of people that benefit in small businesses in New Indiana from undocumented workers, particularly in Elkhart County.
and a lot of our research has been, when we do outreach projects, we kind of look at stuff like that, like Annemarie was saying before. What was it that we found? It was like I don't know, we find different businesses, and we looked at the trucking institution or the truckers, yeah. Just different things that'll affect, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a slide with all of our endorsements that we probably should have added, and so there's things like Indiana Chief of Police, like Association, and like other businesses.
Oh, that's great. Because I think the chamber would also be one of your target audiences, the Chamber
Yeah.
of Commerce.
I think we've reached out to them.
Yeah,
I
for
think
sure.
they did endorse this actually.
The Chamber of Commerce,
That's great.
yeah, I think that they did.
Someone from there definitely did, but I'm not sure. I'd have to check.
That's another thing is very pleasantly surprising, is people are super receptive to those emails, like in those big
Yeah.
organizations and stuff like that.
And I think that's actually a really, I know you had an effective advocacy tool slide back there, but like, not assuming that people won't answer your emails, right? Like actually, if you reach out on an issue that you care about, people actually may be really responsive. I think that's another really great tip.
And so our next question is, what might your process or timeline look like? And so this is probably going to be the hardest one for people to kind of think through, especially if they aren't really that well versed in advocacy work. But what we would want to consider is, which objectives will I tackle first? What kind of research will I have to do? How will I gather this research? Thinking about how long it's going to take, because I think that you just really have to consider the smaller objective tasks, especially, is it going to be years or a few months? So how much work will I have to put in by myself? Will I want to create a team of people to help with me? If it's gonna be a few years, you might be changing leadership. Ours definitely has. And if I do work with a team, how will I divide up the different work that I have to do? And so some of our answers for this are we needed economic research to consider to convince conservatives. And we divided our group into 3 subgroups. Oh, so the way that our meetings kind of work is that especially last semester and this semester as well, with our research individually, we've divided the larger group of 11 into 3 smaller groups, and they're focusing on different subsets of the research that we think is important to our final deliverable, and that's education, crime reporting, and police departments. And so basically through that, they're able to focus on one solid element of the process with that and have like these deliverable goals. And something else that's been very beneficial is that within their smaller groups, they're kind of given more leeway, so we're not controlling them. They're setting their own smaller tasks, and they're giving us, methodologies and timelines for their own work. And having that leniency allows them to feel more in control of the project, and I think it motivates them to do their work because we are all equally in this, and we're all equally going to reach the end goal. So.
The only other thing I would add to consider, which I think you guys have done a great job in with your own project, but I think is a really good thing to import into other work, is like how to incorporate the people who you're trying to help, or like the actual stakeholders, right? Like the voices of the people you're trying to help or protect. That'd be kind of put that as one of your bullets, right? And you guys have done that, I think, really well with the work that you've done on your particular issue. But if you're trying to kind of push this out as like a broader advocacy, educational PowerPoint, you might want to think about that too.
And then how might you manage failure during this process? Because I feel like whenever you embark upon any kind of endeavor like this, like failure is very apparent and something that people sometimes don't really know how to handle. And it can be super discouraging. So the questions that we kind of have to consider for this one are, how can I maintain a growth mindset to improve from failure? How can I regroup and reassess my project when something goes wrong? How do I deal with roadblocks? How will I handle it if I need to reconstruct my planning process at times? And how do I manage it if other people in my group that are working with me do not fulfill their tasks? So that's if you take the route of kind of having other people help and forming a group like ours, is if you're kind of in a leadership position where you're telling people what to do, if they don't really fulfill that work, how do you address that? Because we are all, there are peers, like we're not professors. And so some of the ways that we've done that is we contact people for crucial data. Last semester we contacted people for crucial data on overpopulation in prisons, but they never answered. And so we had to gather that data from similar situations and kind of make predictions that pertain to our own research. And then some other roadblocks that we might have run into is that some research groups maybe fell behind on their work. And so we just kind of had to monitor their work a little bit more closely and just give them more suggestions and really make sure that all of the deadlines were being followed.
Yeah, the only other thing I would maybe add to this is like talking about the arc of success with legislation. It's a really long time. So if you think about, and maybe putting some examples for people about like, if you think about, the work that John Lewis did in the civil rights movement when he was part of SNCC and walking across the bridge, and he saw the first Black president, but he never saw the first female Black Supreme Court justice, right? And so the arc of change is really long, and like reminding people of that like it's incremental and it's slow, and you oftentimes go backwards before you go forward. So I think there's 2 things you're trying to address is like, how do you work with like organizational challenges with the work that you're doing with people, but then there's also just sort of more like systemic challenges about like change is really slow and it's actually designed that way intentionally. And how do you keep people motivated? And then how do you hold people accountable within the organization that you're working for, the project that you're working for? I think they're related, but I think they're sort of different concerns for people. So maybe you might want to break that down into 2 slides.
Yeah, that's actually really good.
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, I mean, like the bill hasn't gotten passed twice,
Right.
which maybe if you're living in the state isn't as big a deal, but that's like half of a student's time here, so.
No, it's a big deal, and it will maybe get passed and hopefully soon, but it might get passed in 10 years, you know? But every effort that you do now and from there on contributes to its passage, right? Like change is really slow, and reminding people of that is, in a world where everything happens really quickly and fastly and everything's on social media, it's even harder, I think.
We kind of had this discussion, like a kind of more difficult discussion a few weeks ago with the group when it didn't get through the committee. We were talking about like working on it throughout the future, and someone asked, well, like what's actually the likelihood that it's gonna get passed? And so we were trying to be like optimistic, and honest about it.
So one way to frame it is, I'm a lawyer, I'm trained as a lawyer. And so if you look at really important Supreme Court decisions that have changed the law, the path to those changes has often resulted from Supreme Court justices dissenting, right? And so you've lost a lot along the way, but you've actually memorialized why you care about this issue or why this issue is important. And you've then provided precedent for a justice in the future to change how the court views this issue. So, and that's something that if you wanted me to talk to folks, if you were doing a workshop on that, I would be happy to talk about that, like how change is really slow, particularly in the American political process, and that losing still creates spaces for winning in the future. And it's really important actually that you document your losses, because they become places where change is possible in the future. So.
Yeah, that's a really good insight, especially with the short time horizon of students. It's like,
yes,
yeah, we gotta make them okay with you might not actually see the success. And then part of what I think we would probably need to make more explicit in this is we have made it a point to bring up what are we doing poorly that we need to change in our meetings, and that type of thing, which is not something that's usually discussed in that specific language. And so that's something we need to put in there too, how to say we didn't do this well, these are the lessons, we actually use those words and talk about it in that way.
No, and I think, Emma, I think you're right. And I think there's you need to also talk about as an organizing principle, how do you operationalize better practices, right?
Yeah.
And that's different than how you deal with how system change is really hard and slow. And they're both really important, particularly for morale with people that are doing this work on the ground, right?
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Really helpful.
Our final question is just, what is the first step that you'll take after today? And we hope that students or whoever's absorbing this presentation will be able to write something down for that. And it's just, what is the first thing that you're going to do in order to get started with or continue with the advocacy work once you do this workshop? This could be something big or small. Everything starts with one small action. And then the last thing is just to feel free to share your question doc with us, and we can continue to help you out. So we're hoping that students that attend the workshop would be able to kind of fill out this questionnaire through all these questions. And if they have further questions, we really hope that they send it to us and that we'll be able to give them positive answers and feedback.
So I have a question for you guys. Once you guys sort of get your presentation ready for students, I would love to share this with our executive director of the Keough School, Washington, DC office, Maura Policelli, who has she's done a ton of work on the Hill. Because I think this could be a blueprint for faculty and students as well. And I'd be interested if you guys would be amenable to sort of having conversations about maybe just informally sharing that. You guys could be part of that conversation, but the way you guys have mapped this out is really awesome. And I think it would be really cool for her to see, because she's usually working with master's students. And I would love to sort of expose her to your guys' thoughts if you guys are amenable to that.
Yes,
That would be so
absolutely.
phenomenal.
Yeah.
We have should I go to the next slide?
Yeah.
We have our advocacy training flyer for, that's for
Oh, awesome.
we would definitely yeah, speak to anyone.
Okay, great,
That would be
awesome.
Because I mean, this is something that like no one ever gets to do something like this, and it just like, I mean, it's been so amazing to see like that we actually can do something like meaningful. And then I think it's also like everyone that's been in this project, it's like built up their confidence so much. Like you see the difference like in a class and everything. It's like, yeah, this thing seems impossible, but oh, I can probably do it, or like I could find a way to do it. So just we want to kind of spread this, just this to
Yes.
people as we can.
Super powerful. It's
Yeah.
really amazing. You guys are doing phenomenal work.
So much, for your time and your feedback. It's really helped a lot. It's definitely gonna develop this. We're gonna add all the comments and develop this further.
Okay, great.
Part of our little, the presentation didn't happen as expected, but something better comes out of it, so.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, no, you're welcome. And you know, it's one of these things where like, sometimes the smaller the better.
Definitely.
I agree.
So you guys are doing awesome work. I'm really impressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll be in touch.
Yes, please.
Thank you so much.
All right.